A brass pocket watch sat on a kitchen counter on Webster Avenue in Pittsburgh's Hill District. It belonged to Frank Delmonico, 74, a retired machinist from the Jones and Laughlin steel mill. His wife Rose had died in 1976. Every evening in 1979, Frank set that watch on the counter beside a single Farberware saucepan and a Kenmore electric range, and he timed himself. 10 minutes. No longer. Number 17 on this list cost him 41 cents a serving. Number 3, his Sunday supper for one, used a single 10-ounce can from Isley's Market on Center Avenue. These 25 meals were not restaurant food. They were the quiet discipline of old men and old women cooking alone, one burner, one pan, one plate. Hit that subscribe button. Here are the 25 easy 10-minute comfort meals for seniors living alone. Number 25, creamed chipped beef on toast. Every Army cook in America knew this dish by heart, long before Frank Delmonico learned it from his father-in-law in 1947. The 1910 Manual for Army Cooks printed the recipe in the back. Soldiers called it SOS. Civilians called it supper. A small jar of Armour dried beef cost about 70 cents at the A&P in 1979. Butter, flour, milk, pepper. Frank melted 2 tablespoons of butter in the Farberware pan, sprinkled in the flour to make a roux, poured the milk in slow while the wooden spoon never stopped moving. The dried beef went in last, torn by hand. 8 minutes from cold stove to plated. He ate it over 2 slices of Mancini's bread, standing at the counter. Here is what most people miss about this dish. It was not the chipped beef that mattered. It was the roux. A man who could make a roux at 74 still had control over something in his kitchen. A roux was a small sovereignty. You did not need a chair for a 10-minute meal. You needed a plate and enough light to see the watch. But the roux was the proof you still knew what you were doing. Frank's father-in-law had told him that in 1947, standing at a different stove, and Frank had not forgotten it. Number 24, tuna melt. The tuna melt showed up on Howard Johnson's menus in the mid-1970s, but working people had been making it at home since after the war. 1 can of chicken of the sea, 49 cents in 1979. A spoon of Hellmann's, a stalk of celery chopped fine, a slice of American cheese. Frank buttered 2 slices of rye, laid the tuna mix on one, draped the cheese on top, and pressed the sandwich into the hot skillet. 4 minutes aside. The cheese ran out onto the bread and caught on the pan and turned into the brown lace that separates a tuna melt from a tuna sandwich. He cut it diagonal, always. Rose had cut it diagonal, and he kept doing it because that was what he knew. Number 23, hamburger steak with onion gravy. A 1/4 pound of ground chuck at 99 cents a pound. 1 yellow onion. A splash of beef broth from a bouillon cube. Frank shaped the patty with his bare hands, pressed his thumb into the middle so it would not dome up on the electric coil, and laid it in the cold pan. The trick on a Kenmore was to start cold. 7 minutes total. The onions went in after the patty came out. You scraped the brown bits off the bottom with the bouillon water and let it reduce while you buttered a slice of bread. That was the gravy. Southern grandmothers served this over mashed potatoes on Sundays. A retired machinist ate it over the bread, standing up, pocket watch on the counter. Same dish, different table. Number 22, tomato soup with rice. 1 can of Campbell's condensed tomato, 23 cents at Kroger in 1979. Half a cup of leftover rice from the night before. A tablespoon of butter stirred in at the end. You heated the soup, stirred in the rice, let the rice warm through. 6 minutes. This was a dish that Polish grandmothers in the Hill District had been making for 60 years, long before Campbell's put it on their label. In the old country, the rice was whatever was cheapest that month. Wheat, barley, sometimes potato grated thin. In Pittsburgh, it was Uncle Ben's. One thing few people talk about with this dish is how the rice thickened the soup into something heavier than soup, something closer to porridge, the way peasant food has always found ways to stretch itself into a full meal. He learned it from a woman named Helena Kowalski, who lived 2 doors down on Webster Avenue and brought him a covered bowl the week Rose died. She did not speak much English. She did not need to. The bowl was the sentence. The recipe came with it, pantomimed at his kitchen counter the next afternoon. A can of soup, a scoop of rice, a finger to her lips and a shake of her head, meaning no salt, the can has enough. Then she left. Frank made it that night, and again the next. Number 21, pork chop and apple skillet. A 1970s church cookbook from Washington County, Pennsylvania, called this dish pork chop casserole and told you to bake it 45 minutes at 400 degrees. Frank did not have 45 minutes in him on a Tuesday. He browned one thin-cut chop, 4 minutes aside on medium-high, pulled it out, dropped sliced Granny Smith into the same pan with a pat of butter and a pinch of cinnamon, and by the time the apples were soft, the chop had rested enough to cut. One pan, 9 minutes, one plate. The old recipe was not wrong. It was written for a woman feeding 6 people on a Sunday, not a widower eating alone on a Tuesday in October. That difference, in the end, was the only thing that mattered about the adaptation. Number 20, egg in a basket. The first printed American recipe showed up in the 1890 Boston Cooking School cookbook under the name Eggs with a Hat. By the 1930s, when sliced bread hit the stores, every child in America knew the dish by a different name. Bird in the nest, toad in the hole, gasoline sandwich in some parts of Pennsylvania. Frank used a juice glass to cut the hole, buttered both sides of the bread, and laid it in the pan. The egg cracked into the hole. 3 minutes covered, 1 minute uncovered, and the toast caught gold around the yolk. He saved the cutout circle, fried it alongside, and used it to mop the last of the yolk off the plate. Nothing wasted. That rule came from the Depression, and old men who lived through it never stopped obeying it. Number 19, American goulash. Not Hungarian goulash. American. The difference mattered. The first recipe for this dish appeared in a 1910 American cookbook under the name chop suey with ground beef, macaroni, and tomatoes. By the 1970s, Chef Boyardee had commercialized it in a can, and grandmothers across the Midwest rolled their eyes and kept making it the right way. Frank's version was a 1/4 pound of ground beef browned in the Farberware pan, a can of stewed tomatoes poured over it, a handful of elbow macaroni dropped in raw, the pasta cooked in the tomato juice. 8 minutes. Lid on. One pan, one plate, no colander to wash. He ate it with a heel of bread and remembered Sunday afternoons at his mother-in-law's kitchen in Bloomfield, when the same dish fed 9 cousins. Number 18, Spanish rice skillet. Frank made this the way a Navy cook had shown him in 1945 on a troop ship coming back from Leyte Gulf. 1 cup of long-grain rice, toasted in a dry pan until it smelled like popcorn. Half an onion, 1 can of diced tomatoes, chicken broth from a bouillon cube, cumin, chili powder, salt. 10 minutes covered, no peeking. The whole thing came out of the pan onto the plate in one heap, steam rising. The Navy cook, a man named Earl Ruiz from El Paso, had taught a dozen sailors this recipe on the long passage home because the galley was running short of everything except rice and canned tomatoes. 34 years later, Frank still made it the same way, including the cumin, which you could not buy on Webster Avenue in 1945, but which sat in a small jar in his cabinet in 1979. And the cumin was the detail that told you the dish had traveled. A man from the Hill District in Pittsburgh was cooking a recipe that had crossed 3 oceans and 40 years to land on his plate. Earl Ruiz had learned it from his own grandmother in El Paso. Earl's grandmother had learned it from her mother, who had cooked it on a cast-iron plancha over a wood fire in a small kitchen outside Juarez before the 1910 revolution. The recipe had passed through a troop ship in 1945 and settled in a Pittsburgh row house by 1979. Frank did not know any of that. He knew the toasted smell of rice, the way the tomatoes bubbled down to paste, the small orange circles of fat on the surface when the cumin hit the hot oil. He knew the meal cost less than 80 cents to make and fed him for 2 nights. The rest of the history was carried in the bouillon cube and the small jar of cumin, silent, and he ate the dish without asking. Number 17, grilled cheese and tomato soup. The pairing was stitched into American memory by the Great Depression and finished by World War II. School cafeterias used to serve it as a complete protein, cheese for the fat, tomato soup for the vitamin C. In 1979, a can of Campbell's cost 23 cents. 2 slices of sunbeam bread, 1 slice of American cheese, a pat of butter in the skillet. 7 minutes total. Frank buttered the outside of the bread, not the inside. You only had to make it wrong once to learn that. He ladled the soup into a coffee mug because a mug kept the soup hotter than a bowl, and because Rose's bowls sat in a box in the basement and he had not taken them out since the funeral. The mug was fine. The soup did not know the difference. Number 16. Fried bologna sandwich. A pound of a Sally's bologna cost $1.49 in 1979. A single slice cost about 9 cents. Frank cut 4 shallow slits into the edge of the slice so it would not dome up on the electric coil. A trick he had learned from his brother Sal, who worked the lunch counter at the old Stouffer's downtown for 18 years. The slits let the heat through. The bologna lay flat, crisped at the edges, turned the color of burnt copper. 2 slices of white bread, a swipe of yellow mustard. 4 minutes. Some people called it a poor man's steak, but Frank called it Tuesday. There was no shame in it, and anyone who thought there was had never stood in front of a single burner on a gray afternoon in February, with the radio on low and the dog already fed. Number 15. Skillet, cornbread, and milk. This was the oldest dish on the list. The recipe went back to farmhouses in Tennessee and Kentucky in the 1830s, carried north with the migrations of the 1910s and 1940s, a wedge of cold cornbread left over from the weekend, a glass of whole milk poured over it in a bowl. That was it. No cooking required, so technically it broke the 10-minute rule, but Frank kept it on his list because his father, Vincenzo, who had come to Pittsburgh from Abruzzo in 1906 and worked the open hearth furnaces at Homestead, had eaten it every night of his last winter in 1962. You crumble the cornbread, pour the milk, let it sit 1 minute to soften. Eat with a spoon. You do not chew cornbread and milk. You take it in the way old men take the last good thing of the day. Number 14. Pan-fried pierogi and onion. The Hill District had a Polish corner for 80 years. On Webster Avenue, old women rolled dough every Wednesday afternoon in the basement of St. Stanislaus Parish and sold them for 50 cents a dozen, frozen, in brown paper bags. Frank bought 2 dozen at a time and kept them in the icebox. A tablespoon of butter, half an onion sliced paper thin. Brown the onions first. Drop 6 frozen pierogi in, lid on, 5 minutes. Flip, 5 more. The potato and cheese filling went hot without the dough falling apart, the way it did if you boiled them. Sour cream on top. He ate them at the table, not the counter. On the one night of the week, he used a plate and a cloth napkin. Wednesday, because that was the day the old women made them, and a man could mark a week by the smell of butter and onion if he had nothing else left to mark it by. The dozen cost him 50 cents, which came out to about 4 cents per pierogi, cheaper than a candy bar at the Rite Aid on Fifth Avenue. The foreman at the mill had once told Frank that food eaten on a cloth napkin tasted better than food eaten on paper. Frank had laughed at the time. 30 years later, alone in a row house kitchen on a Wednesday night, he understood what the old foreman had meant. The napkin was not about the food. It was about the small act of setting a place for yourself and keeping it set. Number 13. Salmon patties. 1 can of pink salmon, 98 cents at Giant Eagle in 1979. 1 egg, a handful of saltine crumbs. Frank crushed the saltines on the counter with the side of a water glass, mixed everything in a bowl with a fork, shaped 3 small patties, and laid them in the hot skillet. 3 minutes aside. The bones in the canned salmon dissolved into the patty and nobody noticed. His mother had made this dish every Friday from 1938 to 1958, a holdover from the meatless Fridays of her girlhood, and Frank had grown up thinking that salmon came exclusively in a can with a blue label. He had eaten fresh salmon exactly twice in his life, both times at weddings, and he had preferred the patties. Number 12. Ham and bean skillet. A ham bone from Sunday's dinner, even a small one, carried enough flavor to turn a can of Bush's navy beans into a whole supper. Drain the beans. Drop the bone in the pan with a half cup of water and let the whole thing simmer while you butter a heel of bread. 6 minutes. Pull the bone, pick off the last meat with a fork, let it fall back into the pot. A shake of pepper. That was dinner. The whole operation cost about 30 cents if you counted the bone as free, which every senior in America counted it. Nothing went to waste. Rose had taught him that. Rose had taught him everything about using a ham bone, and he had learned, and now he used it alone. Number 11, liver and onions. Beef liver was cheap in 1979, 49 cents a pound at the Strip District butcher shops. Most people had stopped eating it, but old men and old women who remembered Depression kitchens still knew what to do with it. Frank sliced the liver thin, dredged it in seasoned flour, and laid it in the pan with a half onion already softening in butter. 3 minutes aside. Do not cook it longer, the way you cook everything else longer. Liver turns to shoe leather at 4 minutes. 2 minutes 40 seconds was the number his mother had taught him. He did it by the pocket watch, and the watch was never wrong. Number 10, Welsh rarebit on toast. A sauce of melted sharp cheddar, a splash of beer, a teaspoon of mustard, poured over thick toast. The dish came to America with Welsh coal miners in the 1850s and settled into Pittsburgh through the Monongahela Valley. A retired Westinghouse electrician named Bryn Llewellyn on Reed Street had taught Frank the right way in 1968 at a firehouse supper for retired machinists. The beer, Bryn had said, was not optional. It cut the richness of the cheese. 8 minutes total. A bottle of Iron City cost 60 cents, and Frank used a tablespoon of the beer in the sauce and drank the rest while the toast browned. A decent trade. Number 9, creamed peas on toast. The dish showed up in American cookbooks starting in 1896 and ran straight through 2 world wars as a wartime standby. A can of Le Sueur peas. A cup of white sauce made from butter, flour, and milk. You pour it over toast, and you eat it with a fork. That was supper for 1 million soldiers' wives in 1944, and it was supper for a retired machinist in Pittsburgh in 1979. Frank had not eaten this dish since his mother died in 1961. One November evening, he saw a can of Le Sueur on the end cap at the A&P, 39 cents, and bought it on instinct. He made the sauce the way she had. The peas tasted like 1949, like his mother's kitchen on Larimer Avenue, like a Wednesday in childhood he had not thought of in 20 years. Some meals are not about hunger. They are about the places you used to sit. But the thing Frank realized that night, standing over the Kenmore with a fork in one hand, was that the recipe had survived 2 generations without being written down. His mother had carried it in her head from her own mother's kitchen in Abruzzo. She had passed it to Frank by making it in front of him for 30 years without ever saying the word recipe. Now, 18 years after she had died, he could make it without hesitation by the pocket watch, with the exact proportion of butter to flour his hands remembered. That was the durability of kitchen knowledge. It did not need paper. It needed repetition and somebody watching. Frank ate the whole plate standing at the counter, looking out the back window at the alley light on Webster Avenue, and he did not cry, but he came close. Number 8, open-faced hot turkey sandwich. A slice of white bread, slices of leftover turkey or packaged deli turkey, gravy poured over everything until the bread disappears. 7 minutes if you already had the gravy. You made the gravy from a packet of McCormick mix, 35 cents, boiled in water for 4 minutes. The old diners along Liberty Avenue served this dish as the blue plate special on Tuesdays, and retired men ordered it because it reminded them of Thanksgiving without the expectation of a family. Frank did not make this one often. It pressed too hard on the edges of what was missing. Rose's chair, the cranberry sauce he had forgotten to buy every November since. He made it sometimes, and he ate it slowly, and he did not apologize to himself for it. Number 7, skillet macaroni and cheese. Before the blue box, a half cup of elbow macaroni, boiled in the same pan you would finish the dish in. Drain the water off. Add a tablespoon of butter, a splash of milk, a handful of shredded cheddar. Stir over low heat until the cheese melted into the milk. 9 minutes. That was the recipe every American grandmother had in her head before Kraft put it in a cardboard box in 1937. Kraft did not invent the dish. Kraft just sold the dish in a shape that fit on a grocery shelf. Frank could have bought the box for 49 cents, and he did not. He bought a brick of Heinz sharp cheddar for $1.20 and made it from the pan. The difference was not money. The difference was the small insistence that an old man cooking for himself was still cooking. Number 6. Scrambled eggs and hash. 1 can of Hormel corned beef hash, 69 cents. 2 eggs from the Pecora Farms dozen that cost 89 cents. You press the hash flat into the skillet, let it crust on the bottom for 3 minutes, make 2 wells with the back of a spoon, crack the eggs into the wells, cover the pan, cook 4 more minutes. The eggs set in the hash. The hash crust lifts in one piece. You slide the whole thing onto a plate with a spatula, and it looks like something a diner cook made at the counter of Eaton Park at 3 in the morning. 8 minutes, 1 pan, a full plate of food for less than $1. That was the math that kept a Social Security check stretching into the 4th week. And the Social Security check in 1979 was $290.40 for a single retiree, which worked out to about $9.68 a day for everything: rent, utilities, food, the insurance premium on the Buick Electra he still kept in the alley. Frank did the arithmetic every first of the month on the back of a Calumet baking powder can with a stub of pencil, and the arithmetic always came out the same. Cheap hot food on the stove, no waste, no eating out. The hash and eggs was the Sunday breakfast that made the math work. Number 5. Cabbage and sausage skillet. Hungarian grandmothers in the Hill District had been making this dish for 70 years. Half a head of green cabbage sliced thin, 1 Hillshire Farm smoked sausage, cut into coins, a splash of vinegar at the end to wake everything up. Frank browned the sausage first, pulled it out, dropped the cabbage into the hot fat, covered the pan, and let it steam down in its own water for 6 minutes. The sausage went back in for the last minute. Cost about $1.10 for the whole skillet. Fed 1 old man with leftovers for the next night. He had learned this dish from his neighbor Magda Horvath, who had come from Budapest as a bride in 1952 and taught the block how to cut cabbage properly. Not coarse, not paper thin, the width of a kitchen match. Magda had told him, the first time she demonstrated at his kitchen table, that cabbage cut too thin turned to mush, and cabbage cut too thick stayed raw in the middle. The kitchen match was the measure. Every Hungarian woman on her block in Budapest had used it for 100 years. Magda had brought that rule across an ocean in her head, taught it to a Pittsburgh widower in his 60s, and gone on with her life. The rule stayed. Frank used it every time, and the cabbage was always right. Number 4. Cornmeal mush with butter. A half cup of cornmeal whisked into 2 cups of boiling water. Salt. Low heat, 7 minutes, constant stirring. Scoop into a bowl, drop a pat of butter on top, drizzle with dark molasses if you had any, or pour milk over it if you did not. The dish had traveled with poor families from the Appalachian hollers through the Great Migration and into the Pittsburgh row houses, and by the 1970s, it was considered hillbilly food. Frank did not consider it hillbilly food. He considered it the cheapest hot thing a man could put in a bowl on a Sunday morning, when the oil furnace was acting up, and the windows were fogged from the inside, and the kitchen was the only warm room left in the house. 12 cents a serving. Maybe less. Number 3. Chicken a la king. 1 10-ounce can from Issalee's Market on Center Avenue, 69 cents in 1979. Heat it gently in the Farberware pan while you toast 2 slices of bread in the side compartment of the Kenmore. 6 minutes total. Pour the chicken and cream sauce over the toast. That was Sunday supper for 1. The dish had its peak in the 1950s at country club luncheons and Eisenhower-era diners, but by the late 1970s, it had drifted down into canned food, the way most of American comfort cooking eventually drifted. Frank did not apologize for the can. The can was a machinist's answer to a cook's problem. Open, heat, eat. Rose had made this dish from scratch on the third Sunday of every month for 29 years of their marriage. He had eaten it with her 148 Sundays. But then she was gone, and the can on the shelf was not the same thing, and it was not nothing either. That was the quiet truth about widow cooking that nobody wanted to say out loud. The cheap canned version of a meal you used to eat with someone was still a meal. It still counted. The point was not the recipe. The point was the sitting down and the eating and the small refusal to skip it. Number 2, potato pancakes. 2 medium Idahos grated on the large holes of a box grater. Squeeze the water out in a clean dish towel. 1 egg, a tablespoon of flour, a pinch of salt. Drop the mixture by spoonfuls into hot oil. 4 minutes aside. These were latkes to the Jewish families who used to live along Crawford Street before the Civic Arena came in and the 1956 demolitions scattered 8,000 people. They were placky to the Polish women on Webster Avenue. They were potato pancakes to Frank, who had eaten them first at a Hanukkah party in 1951 thrown by his foreman at the mill, a man named Saul Rubenstein, who had insisted Frank try one with sour cream and one with applesauce and tell him which was correct. Frank had said both. Saul had called him a diplomat. 38 years later, Frank still made them both ways and still had not picked a side. Number 1, buttered noodles with parsley, a half pound of Pennsylvania Dutch egg noodles boiled in salted water for 6 minutes. Drain, back into the hot pot with a full tablespoon of butter and a handful of fresh parsley chopped fine. Salt, pepper, a grind of nutmeg if you felt like it. That was the dish. 40 cents a serving. The simplest hot meal on the list and the one Frank made the most often because it required almost nothing and delivered almost everything. The butter slid into the ridges of the noodle. The parsley was green, the one green thing on the plate, and some nights that mattered. This was what his mother had given him on the day he came home from school crying in 1916 because another boy had called him a name Frank would not repeat for 63 years. She had not asked what the name was. She had handed him a bowl of buttered noodles and a fork. "Eat," she had said, "and then tell me." He had eaten first. She had been right, the way mothers are right about the order of things. Bulldog gravy was what you made when there was no meat at all, also called white gravy or milk gravy or just gravy with no qualifier. It started with whatever fat you had. A heaping spoon of flour stirred in until the roux thickened, and then milk or water poured in slow. In Appalachia, the version made with water instead of milk was sometimes called poor gravy, even by the people who ate it, because they knew the difference and they felt it. You poured it over day-old cornbread that had gone dry, and the gravy brought it back to something that could fill a stomach. In Kentucky and West Virginia, mining communities during the Depression, and again during the coal slowdowns of the 1950s and 60s, this was what supper looked like on the worst weeks of the month. Not a figure of speech, just the actual food on the actual table. The children who ate it grew up and moved to cities and never made it again, and some never told their own kids it had existed. Stewed tomatoes on toast brought garden flavor to supper tables using canned tomatoes that cost pennies and required almost no preparation. Seniors who had canned their own tomatoes during summer or purchased store brands during lean times understood this humble ingredient's versatility. The tomatoes were heated in a small saucepan with butter, salt, sugar, and sometimes torn bread pieces that thickened the liquid into something approaching sauce. This warm mixture was spooned over buttered toast that soaked up the juices gratefully. The combination provided vitamins, fiber, and comfort of something warm and savory. Some seniors added black pepper or Worcestershire sauce to deepen flavors. Others kept things simple, letting tomatoes speak for themselves. The dish appeared on tables across America during decades when making do meant making delicious from almost nothing. Stewed tomatoes on toast proved that a can of tomatoes and bread slice could become something worth sitting down to eat properly. Number 20. Canned chili over crackers. A can of Hormel chili cost $1.79. A sleeve of saltine crackers cost $1.29 and lasted a month. You opened the can, heated it in a bowl in the microwave for 90 seconds, and crumbled crackers on top. That was dinner. The chili had 15 grams of protein per can. The crackers gave it crunch, and made the portion feel bigger than it was. Truck stops across Oklahoma and Texas sold this combination for $2.99 in the 1980s. Retired truckers who missed the road kept eating it at home because the taste was the same and the price was right. For a senior with limited mobility, the microwave was the only tool required. No stove, no flame, no standing. You could make this sitting in a kitchen chair. Cornmeal introduced its canned chili in 1935, marketing it as a convenience food for busy families. By the 1970s, the company was selling 50 million cans a year. Cinnamon toast delivered sweetness and warmth in under 5 minutes, becoming the default supper for seniors who craved comfort without complexity. The preparation was almost meditative. Bread was toasted until golden, then spread immediately with soft butter that melted into the warm surface. Sugar and cinnamon, pre-mixed in small jars kept near the stove, were sprinkled generously over the buttered surface. The heat caused the sugar to dissolve slightly, creating a thin, sweet crust that crackled between teeth. Some seniors placed their cinnamon toast under the broiler to caramelize the topping into something approaching candy. The aroma alone lifted spirits on difficult evenings. This was comfort food in its purest form, requiring nothing fancy and delivering everything needed. For widows and widowers eating alone during the 1950s and 60s, cinnamon toast meant dessert and dinner combined into one affordable, satisfying meal that tasted like childhood remembered. Number 21. Buttered noodles with salt and pepper. A box of store-brand egg noodles cost 89 cents and contained 8 servings. You boiled a handful, drained them, added a tablespoon of butter, salt, and black pepper. 3 minutes of cooking. 0 minutes of thought. This was the meal that mothers made for sick children in the 1950s, and that widowers made for themselves in the 1990s. The simplicity was not a compromise. It was the entire point. For a senior whose appetite had faded, plain buttered noodles went down easy and stayed down. No strong flavors to reject, no textures to fight. Nursing home cooks knew this. When a resident refused everything else on the tray, they brought buttered noodles. It worked almost every time. The meal was so plain it was invisible. Nobody photographed it. Nobody wrote about it. But it kept people eating when nothing else could. A geriatric nutritionist at Johns Hopkins published a paper in 2018 noting that simple carbohydrate meals like buttered noodles played a critical role in preventing dangerous weight loss among elderly patients living independently. The first frost came fast in the mountains and killed whatever was still green overnight. Fried green tomatoes were what you made the week before. Every tomato that hadn't ripened, sliced thick, dredged through cornmeal with salt and pepper, and laid into a skillet of hot bacon grease until the outside went golden and crackled and the inside softened just enough to give. They weren't the romanticized version that arrived in restaurants decades later. They were a practical harvest, a way of eating what would otherwise rot on the vine. The cornmeal crust transformed the chalky bitterness of an unripe tomato into something with texture and heat, and enough fat to feel like a meal. Mountain families in North Carolina, Georgia, and Tennessee had done this since the 19th century, using cornmeal ground at the nearest mill. You never added anything fancy to the dredge. The grease had to be hot enough that the slice sizzled the second it touched the pan. If it didn't, you'd waited too long. If you had to ask how hot the grease was, you weren't ready to cook them. Soft-boiled eggs with toast soldiers turned a simple egg into an interactive meal that brought small pleasure to solitary dining. Seniors who grew up with this British-influenced tradition continued preparing it well into later years, finding comfort in the familiar ritual. The egg was lowered gently into boiling water and cooked for exactly 3 to 4 minutes, producing set white and gloriously runny yolk. Meanwhile, toast was prepared and cut into narrow strips called soldiers, ready for dipping. The egg sat in a small cup, its top carefully removed to reveal golden liquid within. Each toast soldier was dipped into the yolk, emerging coated in rich goodness that made plain bread taste extraordinary. The meal cost almost nothing yet felt ceremonial, requiring attention that gave structure to evenings that might otherwise blur together. For seniors eating alone, the process of dipping and eating provided small entertainment alongside nourishment. Number 23. Cottage cheese and canned peaches. This was the meal that women of a certain generation called a salad. It was not a salad. It was a scoop of cottage cheese dropped onto a plate beside a mound of canned peach halves drained from a 79-cent can. That was the entire preparation. No heat, no stirring, no standing. A half cup of cottage cheese delivered 14 grams of protein and was soft enough for seniors with dental problems to eat without struggle. The peaches added sweetness and vitamin C. Hospital cafeterias served this exact combination on trays to patients recovering from surgery in the 1960s and 1970s because it required no chewing and no digestion effort. For a senior living alone, it was the meal you made when you did not feel like eating, but knew you had to. It asked nothing of you. It just sat there on the plate, waiting. Weight Watchers put cottage cheese and fruit on its approved list in 1963, and an entire generation of American women never stopped eating it. Chow chow was the relish that stretched a pot of pinto beans into a full supper, and every family in Appalachia who kept a garden made it differently. The foundation was always the same: green tomatoes, cabbage, onions, hot and sweet peppers, salted overnight to draw the water out, then cooked in vinegar and sugar and packed into mason jars while the kitchen filled with sharp, sweet steam that meant fall and the end of the garden. Food scholar Mark Sohn, in his Appalachian Home Cooking, identified chow chow as one of the oldest continuously made condiments in the Mountain South, with roots in British Piccalilli and Cherokee preservation traditions. You spooned it over beans to replace the meat you didn't have, the vinegar cutting the starchy flatness of the pinto in a way nothing else managed. Some families made it hot, some made it sweet. The argument over whose version was better was an argument that never got settled, which is how you knew it mattered. Welsh rarebit in its quick version brought pub-style comfort to kitchen tables, requiring only cheese, milk, and toast to create something surprisingly sophisticated. Seniors who remembered this dish from earlier decades simplified the traditional recipe into something achievable in under 10 minutes. Sharp cheddar was grated and melted slowly in a small saucepan with a splash of milk, dash of Worcestershire sauce, and sometimes pinch of dry mustard. The mixture was stirred until smooth, then spooned generously over toast placed on a plate. The cheese sauce pooled around bread, creating a dish part soup and part sandwich, eaten with knife and fork. The flavors were bold and savory, the texture rich and comforting. For seniors eating alone, Welsh rarebit felt like treating yourself to something special without leaving home or spending much money. This dish transformed ordinary pantry ingredients into something that tasted like care and intention. Number 17. Cheese quesadilla. 1 flour tortilla, a handful of shredded cheese, a dry skillet. Fold the tortilla in half, drop it in the pan, flip it once. 2 minutes. The cheese melted and held the tortilla together, and the edges crisped in the dry heat. Total cost, about 40 cents. Mexican-American families in South Texas made this for children as an afternoon snack. Seniors adopted it as a full meal because it was fast, required one hand, and could be eaten without a fork. A retired school bus driver in San Antonio named Ruben Garza told his daughter he ate quesadillas 4 nights a week. She asked what he ate the other 3 nights. He said crackers. The flour tortilla was introduced to American grocery stores on a national scale in the early 1980s. Before that, you had to live near a Mexican bakery or make your own. By 2024, flour tortillas outsold hamburger buns in the United States. The shift was not cultural appreciation. It was economics. A package of 10 tortillas cost $2.49. A package of 8 hamburger buns cost $3.29. Red-eye gravy required exactly 2 things: country ham and black coffee, the stronger the better. You fried the ham, pulled it out, poured a cup of dark coffee over the hot drippings, and scraped the browned bits loose as it hissed. 3 minutes. Done. Some people in Appalachia called it red sop, and the name came from the reddish ring the coffee and fat left at the skillet's edge, darker on the outside, lighter in the center, like an eye. Country ham had been a staple in Virginia and the Mountain South since colonial times, and the tradition of deglazing ham drippings with coffee likely came from Scots-Irish settlers who wasted nothing and never saw a reason to change. You poured it over grits or biscuits, and the bitterness of the coffee cut the salt and fat in a way that shouldn't have worked, but absolutely did. But the quick suppers didn't end with ham. Beneath all that smoky pork lay a whole world of mountain resourcefulness, where garden scraps and foraged food and vegetables nobody else wanted carried as much weight as any cut of meat. Toast with bacon drippings carried the rich memory of breakfast into evening meals, using saved fat that thrifty households never discarded. During the 1940s through 70s, seniors understood that bacon grease collected in jars beside the stove was liquid gold for flavoring and spreading. A slice of bread was toasted until golden, then spread while warm with a thin layer of cooled drippings seasoned with salt from countless previous cookings. The fat melted slightly into warm bread, creating savory richness that satisfied hunger and stretched resources. Some seniors sprinkled their dripping toast with black pepper or topped it with tomato slices when gardens were producing. The flavor was deeply porky, slightly smoky, and wholly comforting to those who remembered when nothing edible was ever thrown away. This single slice often served as complete supper when appetites were small. Toast with bacon drippings represented waste-nothing kitchens where every ingredient served multiple purposes. Number 24, peanut butter and banana sandwich. George Washington Carver spent decades proving that the peanut could feed a nation. He was right. A jar of peanut butter cost $2.50 in 2024 and lasted a single person 2 weeks. A bunch of bananas cost 65 cents. 2 slices of bread, a smear of peanut butter, half a banana sliced on top. That was a meal with 15 grams of protein, potassium, and enough calories to carry a person through an entire evening. Senior centers across the rural South served this as an afternoon meal because it required no refrigeration, no preparation space, and no cleanup beyond a butter knife and a plate. Harold Meeks, a retired carpenter in Paducah, Kentucky, ate one every night at 5:30 for the last 4 years of his life. His daughter found the routine maddening. His doctor found his potassium levels perfect. The USDA reported in 2023 that peanut butter was the single most consumed protein source among Americans over the age of 75 who lived alone. Not chicken, not eggs. Peanut butter. The reason was not taste. Fried cabbage cost almost nothing. A full head fed a family of 5, and the only other ingredient was salt pork, which was the cheapest cut at the smokehouse or the company store. You shredded the cabbage coarse, got the skillet hot, laid the salt pork in until it colored, then added the cabbage all at once and covered the pan long enough for steam to wilt it. Then you took the lid off and let the water cook out until the edges browned at the bottom of the pan. The pinch of sugar was the secret. Not enough to taste sweet, just enough to pull the natural sugars out of the cabbage and help it caramelize, and the women who knew this never needed to say it out loud because they had learned it by watching. In Depression-era Appalachia, cabbage was one of the few vegetables that grew cheap and reliable in Rocky Mountain soil, and fried cabbage with side meat appeared on supper tables across West Virginia and Virginia coal country 3 and 4 nights a week without anyone considering it hardship. It tasted like something made with care. It was. Milk toast was the quiet companion of countless evenings spent alone, a dish so simple it seemed too humble to call dinner. Yet for seniors watching every penny during the 1950s and 60s, this warm bowl delivered exactly what tired bodies needed. Stale bread was never wasted in those kitchens where thrift meant survival. Slices were toasted lightly, placed in a shallow bowl, and covered with warm milk heated with butter and a pinch of salt. The bread softened into something between solid and liquid, easy to eat for those with dental troubles or diminished appetites. Some added sugar or cinnamon when sweetness was needed. The cost was negligible since milk and bread were pantry constants, and preparation took barely 5 minutes. Milk toast carried memories of childhood sickbeds and mothers tending fevered children. For seniors eating alone, this bowl meant warmth without fuss and nourishment without pretense. Number 22, Fried egg sandwich. 2 eggs, 2 slices of bread, a pat of butter. Total cost in 2024, 63 cents. You melted the butter in a skillet, cracked the eggs, waited 3 minutes, put them between the bread, and sat down. That was it. The Depression generation ate fried egg sandwiches the way modern Americans eat fast food, quickly, cheaply, without thinking. But the nutritional math was different. 2 eggs had 12 grams of protein, B12, and choline, a nutrient that most seniors were deficient in and that doctors now link to memory and brain function. Diners across America sold fried egg sandwiches for 35 cents in the 1970s. By the 1990s, they had mostly disappeared from menus. But in kitchens where money was tight and time was short, the fried egg sandwich never went anywhere. Edna Kowalski, a retired seamstress in Toledo, Ohio, made one every morning and every evening for 19 years. She called it her bookend meal. The day started and ended the same way. That rhythm mattered to her more than the food itself. Cushaw was a hillbilly squash that most of the country never heard of. A large, crook-necked, cream and green-striped gourd that grew heavy on the vine in Appalachian gardens from Virginia down through Georgia, one of the few crops robust enough to thrive in Rocky Mountain soil. Its roots went deeper than European settlement. The Cherokee had been cultivating cushaw for centuries before Scots-Irish settlers arrived, and those settlers learned to grow it from the people who already knew, the same way they learned corn and beans. Sliced thin and laid into a hot skillet with butter and a sprinkle of brown sugar, it cooked fast, the sugar caramelizing at the edges, the flesh going soft and sweet and slightly stringy in a way that butternut or acorn squash never managed. Appalachian food writer Ronnie Lundy, in her James Beard award-winning cookbook Victuals, described cushaw as tied to mountain memory in a way that nutritional language alone cannot hold. The Foxfire Fund in Mountain City, Georgia, still works to preserve heirloom crops like cushaw, but the women who knew the exact moment to pull it from the pan are mostly gone. Bread and milk bowl was perhaps the oldest and simplest supper in the American pantry, dating back centuries and persisting through every economic hardship. Seniors who remembered harder times often returned to this dish when cooking seemed too effortful and appetites had shrunk with age. The preparation required nothing more than tearing bread into pieces, placing them in a bowl, and pouring cold or warm milk over the top. Sugar was sprinkled according to taste, transforming the humble combination into something approaching dessert. Some preferred their bread and milk warm, heating the milk gently before pouring. Others liked it cold, especially during summer months. The bread softened quickly, becoming easy to eat with a spoon, gentle on sensitive stomachs and aging teeth. This was food stripped to its essence. For seniors eating alone, bread and milk represented self-sufficiency and comfort of familiar flavors, asking nothing and giving everything a tired body needed. Number 25. Sardines on toast. In 1943, The Joy of Cooking printed a recipe for sardine toast that cost less than a dime. 80 years later, the meal still works the same way. You opened a tin, laid the fish across a piece of toast, and ate it over the sink or at the table. That was the whole production. A tin of sardines cost 89 cents at most grocery stores in 2024. One tin had 23 grams of protein and more calcium than a glass of milk because of the soft bones packed inside. Seniors who ate sardines regularly were getting omega-3 fatty acids that most Americans pay $30 a month for in supplement form. Fishermen's wives in Gloucester, Massachusetts ate sardine toast for lunch every day through the 1950s and 1960s. They did not call it a health food. They called it Tuesday. For a senior with shaking hands, there was no knife work, no cooking, no heat required. You pulled the tab, you spread the fish, you ate. Done. White half-runner beans were not the beans you bought at a grocery store. They were a specific Appalachian heirloom variety, a pole bean with a creamy white hull and a green runner, developed over generations by mountain gardeners in the region, stretching from southwestern Virginia through eastern Tennessee and into western North Carolina. They grew on poles. They had to be strung and broken by hand, and the children old enough to sit still were expected to help. They cooked faster than dried pintos and tasted different, earthier, starchier, with a flavor that people from outside the region found hard to describe and people from inside recognized instantly as home. You put them in a pot with fatback and water, brought them to a boil, and let them go until they were soft enough to mash with your tongue. You didn't time it. You tasted. The seeds were passed between families the way recipes should be. No paperwork, just a jar over the fence in the fall. When families stopped growing gardens, the half-runner slipped away with them. Buttered noodles satisfied hunger with the simplest combination of starch, fat, and salt, asking nothing of the cook beyond boiling water. Seniors living alone during the 1960s and 70s kept boxes of egg noodles in their pantries for evenings when cooking felt like too much, but hunger insisted on attention. The noodles were boiled until tender, drained thoroughly, then returned to the warm pot where butter was added along with generous salt and pepper. The butter melted into warm pasta, coating each strand with glossy richness that tasted more indulgent than ingredients suggested. Some added dried parsley for color or grated cheese when budget allowed. The entire preparation took under 10 minutes and produced a bowl of comfort that filled empty stomachs without taxing limited energy. Buttered noodles were honest food that never pretended to be more than what they were. For seniors eating alone, this simple dish provided warmth on nights when elaborate cooking was impossible. Number 16. Oatmeal with brown sugar. A canister of old-fashioned oats cost $3.49 in 2024 and contained 30 servings. That was 12 cents a bowl. You measured half a cup of oats, added water, microwaved it for 90 seconds, and stirred in a spoonful of brown sugar. 5 grams of protein, 4 grams of fiber. A warm bowl that felt like morning even when you ate it at 7 in the evening. The Quaker Oats Company began marketing oatmeal as a health food in the 1980s, but Depression-era families had been eating it for survival long before anyone cared about cholesterol. For a senior living alone, oatmeal served a double purpose. It was breakfast when you ate it in the morning, and it was comfort when you ate it at night. The warmth of the bowl in your hands on a cold evening in February mattered as much as the nutrition inside it. Meals on Wheels programs across the country reported that oatmeal was the #1 food item that recipients already had in their homes before the first delivery arrived. It preceded the help. Hominy is corn soaked in an alkaline solution, wood ash, lye, or slaked lime, until the outer hull loosens and the kernel becomes something entirely different, a process called nixtamalization that the Cherokee and other Native American nations had practiced for centuries before European settlers arrived in the Appalachian Mountains and learned it from them. The alkaline treatment unlocked niacin that dried corn could not release on its own, and the settlers who adopted it kept their families healthier without knowing exactly why. By the 1950s, most Appalachian families got their hominy from a can. Van Camp's was the brand most kitchens stocked, warming it in a skillet with butter and cracked black pepper. Old-timers remembered when it was supper itself, heaped into a bowl, eaten hot enough to steam. The flavor was different from grits, blunter and chewier, and anyone who grew up eating it never confused the two. It was its own thing, and the people who understood that distinction are mostly gone. Cottage cheese and canned fruit became staple supper for seniors who needed protein without cooking effort and welcomed sweetness without dessert guilt. This combination required nothing more than spooning cottage cheese onto a plate and arranging canned peach halves, pear slices, or fruit cocktail alongside. The curds provided protein and calcium, while fruit offered vitamins and comfort of something sweet. During the 1950s and 60s, this was considered health food, recommended by doctors for patients needing gentle nourishment. The cottage cheese came in different curd sizes according to preference, and canned fruit ranged from budget brands to premium varieties. Some seniors added cinnamon or honey when company feelings struck. The cost remained minimal, since both ingredients kept well and stretched across multiple meals. Cottage cheese and canned fruit represented the intersection of economy and nutrition that practical seniors navigated daily, providing satisfaction without demanding time or energy. Number 19. Tuna salad on bread. 1 can of chunk light tuna cost $1.09 in 2024. A spoonful of mayonnaise, a pinch of salt, a squeeze of lemon if you had it, mash it with a fork, spread it on bread, 2 minutes. Church food pantries across the Midwest packed tuna, mayonnaise packets, and bread together in bags because they knew this was the meal most seniors would actually make, not the dried pasta, not the canned vegetables that required a pot and a stove and energy that some people did not have. The tuna sandwich. Dorothy Hale, a 74-year-old widow in Wichita, Kansas, told a food bank volunteer in 2019 that she ate tuna on bread 5 nights a week. The volunteer asked if she wanted something different. Dorothy said no. She said the tuna was easy and the bread was soft, and she could eat it watching the evening news without getting up. That was enough. The American canned tuna industry peaked in 1989 when the average American ate 3.5 pounds of canned tuna per year. Fatback had no glamour. It was the part of the hog nobody else wanted. Pure white fat salted and stored in a crock. But in Appalachian kitchens from the 1930s through the 1960s, it was the engine of every meal. You sliced it thin, laid it in a cold skillet, and let it render slow. By the time the slices went brown and rigid at the edges, the pan was full of clear golden fat worth more than the meat itself. The crackling slices got eaten, salty, crunchy, intensely porky, but the drippings went into a jar by the stove that was never empty if the family was doing all right. A half-pound of fatback cost a few cents at the company store in coal towns across West Virginia and eastern Kentucky, and it seasoned every pot of beans, every skillet of greens, every pan of cornbread for a month. You didn't measure. You poured until the color looked right, and if you had to ask what that meant, you hadn't spent enough time watching. The jar by the stove was the first thing to disappear when the next generation moved to town. Peanut butter on crackers provided complete protein and staying power without requiring a single pot or pan. Seniors living on fixed incomes during the 1960s and 70s kept jars of peanut butter in their pantries as insurance against hunger. Saltines, graham crackers, or Ritz crackers served as the canvas for this thick, sticky spread that required some effort to eat, but rewarded patience with satisfaction. The peanut butter could be spread thin for economy, or thick for indulgence depending on the day's mood and the jar's remaining contents. Some seniors drizzled honey over their peanut butter crackers, or added sliced banana when fruit was available. The combination of fat, protein, and carbohydrate kept blood sugar stable through long evenings. This meal required no cooking, no cleanup beyond a knife wiped clean, and no particular skill. Peanut butter on crackers represented pure practicality, transformed into genuine sustenance for people who understood that simple did not mean inadequate. Number 13, scrambled eggs and toast. Clara Canucciari was 93 years old when her grandson filmed her making Depression-era recipes in her kitchen. One of the first things she made was scrambled eggs. She cracked 2 eggs into a bowl, stirred them with a fork, poured them into a buttered pan, and pushed them around for 90 seconds. 2 slices of toast on the side. That was dinner. During the Depression, her family ate scrambled eggs 3 or 4 times a week because a dozen eggs cost 18 cents in 1933, and each egg was a self-contained meal. In 2024, a dozen eggs cost around $3.50 at most grocery stores, which still made each egg less than 30 cents. For a senior with limited grip strength, cracking eggs was sometimes the hardest part. Some kept a small bowl on the counter to crack them against the edge. Some bought liquid eggs in cartons. The adaptation was quiet, practical, and invisible, like most things seniors did to keep themselves fed. The videos Clara made with her grandson gained millions of views on YouTube. Chocolate gravy is exactly the kind of dish that makes people from outside Appalachia raise an eyebrow until they taste it. In Kentucky and Tennessee mountain kitchens, it was made with cocoa powder, flour, sugar, and water. No milk, no butter, cooked until thick and glossy, then spooned hot over biscuits as a supper that was both meal and dessert, and neither one exactly. The recipe spread through families in the Cumberland Plateau from women who knew that sugar and starch could fill a stomach as surely as any meat, and that children who refused beans for the 3rd night running would eat without complaint if something sweet came with it. The wider food world discovered chocolate gravy in the early 2000s and called it Southern, but it was Appalachian first, specific to these mountains. Every family made it slightly differently, some using milk, some adding butter at the end, some keeping no written recipe at all. When your grandmother stopped making it, the version she made stopped existing, and the distance between her version and every other version closed to nothing. Creamed eggs on toast transformed breakfast ingredients into satisfying supper that cost almost nothing and came together in under 10 minutes. Seniors who survived the Depression understood that eggs were among the most affordable proteins, stretching further when combined with simple white sauce. The preparation began with melting butter in a saucepan, whisking in flour until smooth, then slowly adding milk while stirring until thickened. Hard-boiled eggs, already prepared and waiting in the refrigerator, were chopped and folded into this creamy base with salt and pepper. The mixture was spooned over buttered toast while still warm. The result was rich, filling, and deceptively elegant for something made from such humble ingredients. This dish fed widows and widowers across America during decades when eating alone meant cooking economically but eating well. The eggs provided protein while the toast gave substance, and the sauce made everything feel like someone had taken care. Frank's pocket watch still sits on that Webster Avenue counter in the photograph his grandson took in 1982, 3 years before Frank died. 10 minutes was never about the clock. It was the discipline of a man who refused to hand his supper to a TV tray. Make one of these this week. Sit at the table, use a plate. These 25 meals were proof that an old man cooking alone, one burner, one pan, was still answering for himself at the end of the day. Tell me in the comments which one you will make first.